Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Sausalito Public Library for tonight's Sausalito People event. We have David Wronski here with us tonight. Before I introduce David, let me tell you a little bit about the programs that we have coming up in ensuing weeks. So the Sausalito People series is 6 straight Friday evenings, so thank you all for coming and sharing your Friday with us here. Next week, we have Paolo Salvagioni. He's an artist here in Sausalito, also an engineer and generally an all-around mad scientist. He was the principal engineer for the 10,000-year clock for the Long Now Foundation, if any of you have heard of the Long Now Foundation. Has done some interesting work for the Headland Center for the Arts. And so we'll have him here at this time a week from today. Their schedules at the round table and back. The following week, the 19th of April, Gordy Nash, who's a well-known sailboat racer and the founder of Sausalito's Open Water Rowing Regatta, will be here. April 26th, Maria Finn, who's an author and journalist. And then on May 3rd, we'll have 2 children's book authors, Amy Noveski and Bethany Murguia. So to tonight's guest. David Wronski was born in the suburb of Chicago and lived there until he headed west to Chapman University in Southern California in 2004. He moved to Sausalito after college and currently lives in Hurricane Gulch with his girlfriend Dawn and their Weimaraner, Wendy. Within the next few weeks, David will finish his master's degree in education and receive his teaching credentials. He hopes to teach math full-time at a high school in Marin for the next school year. David's running accomplishments include the Brazil 135, a 135-mile, 47-hour crew-supported race in the Serra de Mantiqueira Mountains of Brazil, a 140-mile nonstop run along the coastal trail from Mendocino County to Point Bonita Lighthouse, and a 68-hour, 168-mile, nonstop, no-sleep circuit of the Lake Tahoe Rim Trail. This fall, he plans to compete in the Tour des Géants, a 200-mile run through the Alps in Europe. As difficult as it may be to believe, David only began running seriously in 2009 when a friend talked him into running the Big Sur Marathon. Please join me in welcoming David Wronski.
Thank you, Abbott. First off, I just want to thank Abbott and all his staff and video crew for being here and all of you who came to spend the Friday night with me. This is very exciting for me. I've never done this before. I've never given a presentation or any type of speech about any of the things that I've done running oriented. I'm a math teacher, so I'm used to teaching high school students math that they're not so impressed to have to learn every day, so it's nice to be here with people that are interested in what I'm talking about. So to just start and kind of give you an idea of where I started and where I am now, all of this began in April of 2009. So this was almost 4 years ago exactly that I completed my first marathon. It was a Big Sur marathon, all road. And the only reason I did that was because I got convinced by a friend of mine who was a runner and very high-level marathon runner. And he was just kind of pressuring me into it. So finally I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so it turned out fine, like trained for it, thought it was going to be easier than it was. And when I did it, I couldn't believe how hard it was. Like I was miserable. I was in so much pain. I thought I was going to quit like 4 or 5 miles away from the finish and just never wanted to do it. When I finished, or never wanted to do it again. When I finished, I had no aspirations of anything beyond that, and people were asking me, oh, what are you going to do, or what's the next thing that you want to do, and I had no idea. So I waited a few months and kept running just off and on, and did the San Francisco Marathon right here in the city in July of 2009, so that was just a few months after. And after that, that pretty much kind of got me away from the road marathons. I just didn't enjoy it. It was like 1 million people packed into a tiny area and super competitive. Everybody was like stressed out about their time and their pace and all that stuff, and I was just not really interested in it. I was not looking for competition or competitive sports after this point in my life because I had been a competitive baseball player for most of my life. And so this was not something that I wanted to turn into a competitive thing. So anyways, I finished that and decided I will never do another road marathon or any type of running event on roads of any kind. And so I lived here in Sausalito before I ran the first marathon, so I had already been living here. But I had never really explored the trails or explored any of the headlands or Mount Tam area. So I started running on trails, and I started, instead of wearing shoes, which was what I was obviously wearing on the road, I found Vibram 5 Fingers, which you might see in some of these pictures. They're really popular now. When I started using them in 2009, I had to drive like 2 hours north to some tiny little shoe shop to find like 2 pairs. And now they're everywhere. They're at REI, and you can find them online and stuff. So it was a very interesting find because I found these shoes and went trail running and just loved it and never had any pain, never had any issues. And that was another reason I hated the marathon so much, is I was in so much pain. Like, it hurt during, it hurt after. So I was just, not impressed with how I felt during this, 26 miles. So I started wearing these shoes, the Vibrams, and started running, just training on the trails, enjoying it, having no idea what I was going to do. And then I decided to sign up for the North Face 50-miler endurance challenge, which is like a championship event for trail runners who are competitive and who do this all year round. So it's a $10,000 prize, I think, for first place, which is a huge deal for ultra running because marathons are a lot more... there's a lot more money in marathons than ultra running, so there's almost no money. So it was a big decision, and just decided to continue training on the trails. And long story short, in December of 2009, which was about 5 months after the first marathon, I completed the first 50-miler in the headlands. And so after I did that, that was pretty much the big step. From a marathon to a 50-miler for me was the hardest thing to do physically, because it's just all physical at that point. You're not running for a full day. You're running for about 10 to 12 hours. I was running for about 12 hours, which is a full day of sunlight, but not a full day when you get used to running 24 hours. So that was a huge physical step for me. And when I did that, just kind of took off from there and ended up doing a 100-miler in Lake Tahoe, which is called the Tahoe Rim Trail, which that buckle over there is a award you get when you finish. So that was the next step, and that was kind of what introduced me to the Tahoe Rim Trail, because this is an organized race that is just 50 miles of the entire 168-mile course, loop. So you do 2 50-mile loops, but it's all on the eastern Nevada side, which is much easier and much flatter than some of the other portions of the Tahoe Rim Trail. So I signed up for that, and that was in July of 2012. So I had about 6 months in between the 50-miler and the 100-miler to get ready, train myself more as best I could at least. And I just really had no idea going into the 100 what was going to happen and if I was going to be able to finish or how long it would take me. I didn't know any of that, so I knew I could run 50 miles, so I was going to do that and then go from there. So luckily I had a great team, as with all of my other runs before that and after that, between my girlfriend and my friends who are amazing and very helpful, and they all came to Tahoe with me. And as you see in these pictures, there's gourmet food laid out for me, and there's like mats waiting for me to lay down and all this stuff. They take good care of me, because if it wasn't for them, I probably would not have finished almost any of these. So I have a very good support staff. But the Tahoe Rim Trail 100 was a huge deal because it was the first race that lasted more than 24 hours for me. It took me 33 hours, which is pretty slow for people who run hundreds. 35 hours or 36 hours, I think, is the time limit, to give you an idea. So I was near the end. I was not at all looking to compete in any way, nor did I even attempt to. But I got to 50 miles at about 13 hours, so gives you an idea of how slow I went the second 50, because I had no idea what was going to happen, and I was really scared just mentally of what would transpire. So I ended up making it the 50, did 13 hours, and then from there just decided to keep going, and that was where it was pretty much all mental. And that's kind of like where the first time I ran a race that was not just physical, it was more mental than physical, and that's kind of what transpired to make me continue going further than that. So I finished the Tahoe Rim Trail in July of 2010, and that took 33 hours, and I finished and was very, very happy, very satisfied with what happened. And just enjoyed the rim trail. And I had never been up there. I had never seen any of the trail before. I'd only been to Lake Tahoe maybe once before that. So in the back of my mind, I kind of remembered the Tahoe Rim Trail was there, and I knew it was a lot longer than what we had just done because we only ran a 50-mile portion of it. So I finished that race, and then that was July of 2010. And then I kind of took a little break and decided that I was going to try to get into this race in Brazil that is 135 miles. And the reason I did that is because there are not many trail races in the U.S., at least then, that were 135 miles. There's a famous Badwater run that many people have heard of in Death Valley. That's all on the road. And I've actually crewed a race, a friend of mine who did that race, and just experienced it without actually running it. But I had no desire to be on the roads again. So there's another option in Minnesota called the Arrowhead 135, which is all in the snow, and you're pulling a sled. And I'm from Chicago, and I don't like snow, and so that was not an option either. So anyway, I just found the Brazil 135 through some research and some friends, and through just kind of ultra running communities online and via other friends and Facebook and all that stuff. You kind of just meet people who have done these things that you never knew existed. So I met a guy online who I had known through another friend, and he had told me about the race, and I said, this sounds awesome. It's exactly the distance I want to try, because my whole thing was distance. I didn't care about time. I didn't care if I was the last person to finish. I wasn't competitive at all. So my whole goal was to see how far I could go and see, without stopping, meaning without sleeping, what would that limit be. So I ended up 6 months later at the start line. I was accepted. I got into the race, just very luckily, because I was kind of a rookie to be trying that race. Most of the people that had run that race were from Brazil, or the people from the U.S. running it, which was about 6 of us or 7 of us, were very experienced and had done multiple 135s before. And so that race was just incredible. I mean, I'm sure you've seen pictures. These pictures are in chronological order, actually. So this is the Tahoe Rim Trail right now. But those green mountains you might have seen earlier if you got here early enough were Brazil. And I'll show you more of those. But pretty much just an incredible experience and the most beautiful scenery I had ever seen. Some of the hardest trail I had ever run on. Very technical at points. It was extremely rocky on a lot of the portions of the trail, and I had been wearing those 5 fingers, the Vibram 5 fingers, the entire time from when I did the first 50 all the way up through this race. So it was a big change. I was not used to it. The hills were incredible, and the heat was extreme. It was, I think, 96 to 100 for 2.5 days. And it did not rain at all, which was one of the very weird things, because every single year it rained a ton, because it's in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of these mountains that are just very tropical. So it was very strange that it didn't rain. But for whatever reason, I didn't say earlier, but in Tahoe Rim Trail 100, it was also like 95 degrees, which is not normal for Tahoe either. So I have a weird coincidence with heat when it comes to my races. And so actually at the Brazil run, I have a website here that will show you some elevation charts and give you an idea of what the course was. So the Tahoe Rim Trail 100, I don't have a ton of information on, but you can definitely go online and see more information about it. This is the route for the Brazil 135. And this is a point-to-point race, which is another reason I wanted to do it. I'm not a big loop fan, so the 250-mile loops for the Rim Trail 100 were fine because it was, unfamiliar enough to not really get bored or anything. You would never know what you're looking at twice. But this was awesome because it was a point-to-point 135, so that's very rare to find. And so this is the route here, and it's all on the Caminho de Fé, which is called the Path of Faith. It's in Portuguese, obviously. And so it's just, again, beautiful, beautiful course. You'll see more pictures, but I can show you a few here too. So this is from the highest point. And so that's about, I think, 4,000 feet or so. It's a little dark up there, but just some beautiful views the entire way. Very, very green. And surprisingly, on a very wet day, the headlands looks very similar to Brazil. When it's getting plenty of rain and it's nice and green and all the flowers are blooming, it looks very similar in the way the single track kind of follows the hills here is similar to some of the trails in like northern Marin. So that's that. And then I'll actually show you the chart real quick. This is the elevation chart. Give you an idea of the elevation. So it's in kilometers, which is, so 217 is 135 miles. So it's kind of hard to judge how far you're looking at, but to give you an idea, like 20K right there would be about 12 miles or so, I believe. Yeah. So that steep portion is the killer in the beginning. But so yeah, that ended up being by far the hardest and the longest race I had ever done, because that last one was 33 in Tahoe, and this one was 47. So it was a dramatic increase in the amount of time I had to stay awake, be moving, stay on my feet. And so that 2-day mark was a big barrier, just like the 24-hour mark was when I did the 100. So it's just a process that, really you just kind of evolve with it and you get used to it. And once you reach that certain point with time without sleeping, you just are expecting it to feel a certain way. And when you know what that expectation is, you just deal with it better each time. So it's something that can be very intimidating at first because you don't know why things are going to happen or you don't know how you're going to feel at certain points. But the only way you get through it is just by experiencing it and then learning from that experience, whether it's a good experience or a bad experience. Things will always go wrong in that long of a run. So the question is just how long you're going to be okay and then how long you're going to suffer, because you will suffer. So that's not an option. So that was in January of 2011. And we're getting closer to present day. And so the next idea was to do the Tahoe Rim Trail. And so I had gotten back from Brazil in January, and I had about 6 months to train and do this, because when I had done the 100, I was aware that the Tahoe Rim Trail was not 160. The Tahoe Rim Trail was not just the 50-mile portion. It was 168 miles full loop. So when I got done with Brazil, I was planning on doing the Tahoe Rim Trail 168, but it was coming to about October when I was going to do it. So it was the beginning of October, and it had not snowed. The Tahoe Rim Trail was totally dry and clear, and it was all ready to go. And then about 24 hours before I started, it snowed like 3 feet or some crazy amount one night. So that was the end of 2011, and so I got, not sure if you saw some of the pictures, but earlier there were some snow pictures where I was walking in the snow, and that was not on purpose, but it was insane. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't find the trail. The trail was covered with 3 feet of snow. We got up to about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It took us about 5 hours to go 13 miles, and pretty much decided to just call it a day. We ended up going in almost a complete circle. So after all that time, we ended up really close to where we started, not on purpose. So that was interesting. So that was a failure. Not a failure, but we just couldn't continue to do it. It was covered in snow, and so that was it. So we stopped, and that was 2011. The end of it, the October of 2011, and then 2012, the summer, we went back to the Rim Trail and did that. So instead of doing the snow race, the snow run that I couldn't finish, I decided to do this coastal trail run, which was just kind of an impromptu thing because I had known about it from living here. So if you see that top little letter A there is in Mendocino, it's the southern end of Mendocino County. So this was in December, and obviously the weather here is not a problem in December. So we had planned a 150-mile run from Mendocino all the way to Point Bonita Lighthouse, which was the finishing point right here by the bridge. And so that was a good replacement run, and it was enjoyable. It was a lot more road than I had wanted because it's trail. Certain portions, Marin has a ton of trail for the coastal trail, but Mendocino and Sonoma County don't have a lot of trail. It's a lot more road. So we ended up doing that, just some beautiful, beautiful runs in the middle of the night. You're running on single track trail and or highway, but there's nobody there. There's no cars. There's nothing. So it was just beautiful moon, full moon, stars everywhere. You would never know you're 100 miles from the city. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. You're with the cows and the dairy farms. So it was a great replacement run for what was a disappointing finish to the first attempt of the rim trail. And so we did that, and that was 44 hours. And it was much easier. It was not as steep as the previous one. So Marin is the hardest section of those three counties of Mendocino, Sonoma, and Marin. So the end was difficult, but definitely not like a mountain course at all. So we did that, and then went to 2012, and that was when over there, if you look at that map, next time you're up, you can see the route. We did the entire rim trail and finally got the weather to cooperate and did that. And 68 hours later, finished 168 miles. And that was about, let's see if I can do my math, that was 21 hours longer than the longest race I had done up to that point. So Brazil was 47 hours. This was 68. So it was extremely difficult in every way. The elevation was definitely a factor, noticeable, especially towards the end. And I went clockwise, which you can go either way. People do both. Clockwise is said to be the harder way just because you finish with the hardest section of the entire thing. It's called Desolation Wilderness. If you guys are campers, it's a big camping spot. So that was an incredible, I think I wrote at least 10 pages on that. So like I said, you'd be here all night if I talked about each and every detail of all of my runs. But definitely for the sake of time and for your interest, I would like to keep it informal and keep you guys asking questions so I can just talk about whatever you want me to talk about. Abbott, how are we on time? We're good? Okay. So yes, the Tahoe Rim Trail run was an amazing run. It was something that I had planned for a long time. Obviously, it was 2 years because I had attempted it a year before that. Didn't work. So I went back and just was determined that it was going to be okay regardless of the weather. And it didn't rain. It was beautiful the entire time. Got lost about, I'd say 3 hours total out of 68. So it's not too bad. Some guys have gotten lost longer or more times than that. It's tricky at points to stay on course. And in the middle of the night when you can't see very much and there's not a lot of trail markers everywhere, it gets interesting. And then luckily I was with people that were not awake for as long as I was, so I was not completely dependent on myself for cognizant things because I would not be very productive of trying to figure things out, especially anything that took mental capacity. So luckily I was always with either my girlfriend, my friends, people that are experienced trail runners, so they were very helpful and pretty much responsible for my safety. So it was an incredible run. It was 3 days and, 3 nights, so 4 sunrises, I guess. I saw the first sunrise because I woke up early, started the run, and then there was 3 nights, so 72 hours would be 3 full days, so it was almost that because I was up for about 71 and ran for about 68. So again, just many of these pictures that you'll see, and I'll continue the slideshow as we talk, but just amazing experience and amazing landscape. The Tahoe Rim Trail is just one of the most beautiful areas in California and one of my favorites personally. I can't imagine running in a better place. Just tons of single track, which is a huge advantage for people who are trail enthusiasts, because you're not running on fire roads and you're not running on these wide roads that cars can go on. You're running on places that only you can walk and run. So just incredible views the entire way. A lot of hallucinations, which I know you probably read about in the little brief synopsis that I have it put together, which was awesome. So that's one of the biggest things that you deal with mentally, and that was by far the hardest challenge for me. After about 60 hours was, I think, the point where I noticed it the most, and it was directly affecting my ability to continue moving and or running. So it gets to a point where you kind of become so used to moving and so used to either walking or running that you almost like fall asleep moving. But you don't know you're sleeping. I guess I've never gotten to this point completely, but the first step or the first sign of like extreme sleep deprivation is temporary blindness. So your sight goes away faster than anything else. So I was definitely not to that point, but you start hallucinating to the point where you don't know what is real really and what is not. I mean, you're looking at a tree and you see a lion's head in the tree, or you see someone like hanging from a tree, just weird stuff, that people in chains like in the bushes, very, very scary stuff that I would never imagine you would hallucinate. But that happens, and it's just something that you get used to, and again, something you learn from. So when it happens again, you can deal with it that much easier. It's never completely easy to deal with, but the first time is always the worst time. So I had hallucinated a few times in Brazil, never to the point where it was like making me not able to continue or not able to move. But a few times in this run for the first time, I experienced that. So it was to the point where I was close to not continuing. But luckily, we held together and finished in 68 hours, which was longer than I wanted it to be, but it was fine because that was my goal, was just to finish. So the time was never really a factor for me. That is actually from the highest point, if you're looking right now, from Dick's Pass. And that is after about a 3 hour summit. We got to the highest point, and we were happy to be going downhill at that point, and then we had a friend meet us at the bottom. So some of the pictures from that area, the Desolation Wilderness, is just incredible, and just the most beautiful part of the Tahoe Rim Trail by far. So it was a great experience I'll never forget, just something that pretty much drove me to continue doing things that aren't races, because eventually you get to the point where you can't always do a race because there may not be a race that the distance matches what you want to do. And so since time was never really a factor for me and I didn't want to compete, I was always looking for a longer and harder race to do. And so this was kind of the best replacement for that, because it was not an organized race, but it was an organized trail, and they had access points and you could figure out where you could get aid. So it was a doable thing. Because there are many trails in California that I would like to do and that people through hike, but it's very hard to get supported runs on because people just would be hiking hours and hours to meet you places. So it's not something that you can easily organize. So that was the last thing, and now we're to present day, and I'm here, and I am lucky enough to be going to Geneva. I fly into Geneva, Switzerland. September 8th is the race I am entering, or I have entered and been accepted to. It's called, again, Abbott said it better than me, but it's Tour of the Giants in French. So it's Tor and then Des, like DES, and then Giants. So you can Google it and see if it comes up, but I'm sure you'll get the spelling right. So this is the longest, hardest nonstop trail race in the world. In the fact that it is single stage, meaning there's no rule of how far you can go each day. There's multi-stage runs where you can only run 50 miles or 30 miles or whatever the limit is, and it may be like a 1,000-mile race, but it's over an extended period of time where you're camping and sleeping and camping and sleeping and running. So this is kind of like my retirement race, because after this there's really nothing else out there organized, at least, that I would be attempting to do, and this will definitely push the limit of having to sleep. So there's a very good chance that I will need to sleep in order to finish the race, and the goal for this race is just to finish. It is 200 miles. It's through the Swiss Alps, French Alps, traverses Mont Blanc, Matterhorn, and 3 of the other highest peaks in that area. And so it's 80,000 feet, or about 75,000 feet of elevation change. Gain. So 75,000 feet of gain, 75,000 feet of loss, which is an extreme amount. To give you an idea, the Tahoe Rim Trail is about 26,000. So this is like 3 times that. So it's extremely steep and very slow. The winner will finish, last year he set a course record of about 76 hours, which was about 5 hours or 4 hours faster than the last winner the year before. So those are, professional European runners that live there and train on that territory and are incredible runners that I'm not even close to, competing with. And yet that's a long, long time for the winner to finish in near 80 hours. So this is going to be something that is completely new territory for me, make the Tahoe Rim Trail look like a flat track compared to. So it's going to be an extreme challenge mentally and physically. Luckily, I'm going to have hopefully a good group of people that I've been with during my last few runs. 2 friends of mine that are from the area in Europe, from France, and my girlfriend and whoever else is able to come with me. So hopefully it will all work out and I have a fighting chance of finishing. So we will see. It will be a very long and steep run, and there will actually be about 12 or 13 minute long video that's really good and high quality, so you'll be able to see a lot of the course. So that is where I'm at now. So I have about 4 weeks left of teaching left to finish my master's, and I will finish that, and then I will be able to train, because right now I'm too busy and I have no time to do as much running as I'd like. So just got on a run today for the first time in a week, which was like ridiculously long for me. So I was very happy to get out there. And a couple more weeks I'll start training, and I'll have about 4 months to get ready for this race. So it's September 8th, and I am one of, I believe, 7, maybe 8 Americans that have been chosen. There's 550 participants. So they are all from, I think, 25 countries or so, maybe even more. Yeah, that's the picture. That's what I was describing before. Those are the Vibrams. Where was I? So yes, the race is 560 participants, 600 participants, which is a huge amount for an ultra. It's one of the biggest ultra marathons in the world, especially for that distance, because there's not many other races that are like that. But it will be a huge event and very, very big deal in Europe. It's got a ton of media coverage. The professional athletes come from all over the continent to do that race. Guys who don't necessarily do the shorter stuff, but yet people who are like more mountaineer oriented. There's runners that are competing in 100 milers and 50 milers and stuff that do this race, but the ones who are very, very good are specialized in this extreme distance and the difficulty especially. So I hope to finish. I'm hoping it will take, it's hard to say, but anywhere from 80 to 100 hours, hopefully. I'm going to shoot for 80 hours without sleeping, see how that goes. I have 8 hours to add on to my last attempt, so I need to be a little safer than I have been in the past, because I'll be by myself. I'll be meeting stations at anywhere from like 10 to 25 miles, but I will be by myself in between. So I won't have a support crew. I won't have friends to run with. I won't have people to make sure I don't fall off the side of the cliff. So I have to be a lot more cognizant of what I'm doing and aware of, mentally what I can accomplish and be safe. So it's going to be a totally new experience for me. But I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to the training and the lead up to it. Going to Europe, I've never been there. I've been to Brazil and Australia and a few other places, but never been to Europe, so it's going to be a new experience for me, and I'm looking forward to it. So we have a very interesting video on the exact race that I'm doing. It's the 2011 film, so it's from a few years ago, but obviously same course every year. So everything you see, they have the distances marked. They have everything on the top of the screen when they stop, so you'll see the route. It'll be in kilometers, but you can do the conversions. So it will be about 12 or 13 minutes, but should be pretty interesting.
for Italy! Tanto bene, Picchi.
Ce ne vuole tanto. Ormai.
So I think we'll just leave it open, I guess, to questions. I don't want you guys to have to listen to me
Yeah,
talk more.
Can you hear me? Yes. I'm sure everyone will have a lot of questions, and I have a microphone here that I'll pass around for folks. David, I'll start out with a two-part question though
Sure.
for you. First off, just as fellow Sausalitans, what can we do to help out? And the second part is, how much would it cost us to get you to wear a Sausalito Public Library T-shirt during the race?
It's a good question. Well, I just paid $550 to get into the race, so no. But I mean, this race is pretty much just going to come down to having hopefully a group of like 2 to 3 people with me. And lucky enough, I have people that are very close friends of mine that are from France, and they're going to visit hopefully their family at the same time. So this is not costing as much as the Brazil race did, just because I'm not going to have as many expenses. And if I do go, I'm not going to be there for an extended period of time before or after. So it's going to be kind of a quick do it, get there, do it, and leave. But I would absolutely be open to wearing any sort of advertising I need to. I have no conflicting sponsorships.
Excellent.
Just gonna.
Hi, David.
I know this guy.
Yeah. First of all, congratulations. I feel so jealous because you're gonna run this very, very good race. My question is, do you have any expecting time for this race?
To finish?
To finish, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, the plan. It's a very shaky. He asked how long it would take me to finish potentially this race in Europe. I'd like to say 80 hours. I know that's probably very, very optimistic. So 90 to 100. I'm not being competitive again, like I haven't been before. But just because of the fact that I won't be sleeping, or I won't be sleeping much, I might be able to kind of push myself to the front of the finishers just by my strategy, not by my competitiveness. It's such a slow race that the winner is finishing in if you do the math, it's 2.5 miles per hour. So it's extremely slow for a winner of a race to run that slow because they're hiking and obviously stopping a lot. So hopefully 80 to 100 hours, but who knows. So I'm going to try to go 80 hours without sleep, and as far as I get there, after 80 hours, I don't think I'll be able to go any farther, if I can even get to 80 hours without sleeping. So we'll see. But
could you describe what is meant by a non-stop race? I noticed there are people stopped and ate or lay down or whatever. So
it's called single stage and multi-stage. So single stage races are races that don't have any rules about how far you run and when you sleep. You can run as far as you want, as fast as you want, and you can sleep anytime. Multi-stage races, you can only run 50 miles a day, and it's whoever gets there fastest, and so it's a time thing. So this single stage run just means there's a 150-hour time limit, and you finish in as much time as you need, and you sleep as much as you want, and so that's why it's called single stage, meaning that there's no setup points where you sleep and camp and wake up together and eat breakfast and then go run again. So it's just nonstop. So the winners may not sleep at all, or may sleep for 30 minutes at a time, because they're running a much faster speed. So they may race for 24 hours or 30 hours and then sleep for an hour or sleep for a half an hour. But that's just up to them. So that's what a single stage you stop to eat, go to the bathroom, change clothes. You're going from potentially sub-freezing temperatures to 80, 90 degrees. So you're going in very different environments. So there's a lot of time that you're not moving, but hopefully it's not too long. So.
Hi. Congratulations. This is really a remarkable feat, and I'm really proud of my fellow Sausalitan that you've done this, and I see great pictures of places I know here in the area, but also what a gorgeous place that you've chosen to run. I have a multitude of questions, but I'll try and keep them simple. When you do a non-programmed race, something like the Coastal Trail that you did,
sure.
How do you actually stage it? How do you know where you're going to meet your people? Who runs with you? Do they run in short segments? And then second question that you can answer simultaneously, do you still wear the finger shoes? And are you planning to, wear them through this race? And how many pairs of shoes do you go through
Okay.
in a race like that?
Perfect. So the first question, how I set up the support. So for the Tahoe Rim Trail, it was a lot more planning oriented because there are about 8 points. If you look at the map there, they're circled, but there's about 8 access points on the entire trail. So I would meet them every, let's say, 12 to 30 miles, 12 to 25 miles. So that would be where I would set up, or where they would set up with like a vehicle and food and all that stuff, so I could change, lay down, stretch out, whatever. So that was pretty well planned. And again, I had friends that were very experienced with the Tahoe Rim Trail and had done it many times. And so it helps to have people that are logistically oriented, because that's a huge part of it. I mean, so I had people with me, and then I had people with their vehicles meeting me at the next point. So I would always have at least one person with me on the rim trail. So this will be the longest run that I do by myself, because you're not allowed to have pacers. They're called pacers usually. So yeah, that's how that worked. And then the shoes, I do wear the shoes still, but luckily in the last 3 years, the whole minimalist barefoot running thing has been a ridiculous trend, and you see people in the grocery store with them on and stuff. And when I had to first find them, they were really hard to find. So now they're everywhere, and I still like them, but the shoes they make now to compete with Vibrams, from New Balance and all these other companies, are very minimalist oriented. So they have zero drop, meaning it's just like wearing a normal barefoot shoe, like a Vibram, but it's an actual shoe. So the protection is almost nothing, but it's more protection than a Vibram. So for this race, I won't be able to use Vibrams much, if at all. So I have a Minimus New Balance shoe that's very, very light and almost skimpier than Vibrams, but in a full cover, my toes aren't separated. So I will maybe use them a little bit, but not much. And then what was your last question? Oh, not too many. I actually got, I think I got about a year, or 8 or 9 months out of each pair of Vibrams, and eventually the holes come through, and you just tape them for so long, and then the tape just falls off, and you just have to get new ones. But yeah, I mean, probably if I'm training 6 months, 8 months, but I've had Vibrams for more than a year.
Why would you choose to use a pair of shoes? And are those your feet?
Yeah, so that was in the Rim Trail 100. They just get dirty.
Oh, that's dirt?
It's just dirt, yeah. So that's what I wore. So I wore those for the 100, the 135, the 140, and then the Tahoe Rim Trail, I wore the New Balance shoes I was talking about the last 30 miles.
You wore the same pair?
No, different Vibrams, but yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't last that long. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a lot of... Luckily, I've hated shoes my entire life. I've always worn sandals like I am right now. When I teach, I have to wear shoes, and it bugs me a lot. So that's why I wore sandals tonight. But it's just something that I've always had or been used to, and I've luckily developed, I guess, pretty strong feet. And even after I don't run for a week or two, I mean, I notice it. My feet get much weaker. So part of the training that I have to prepare for 6 or 8 months is my feet getting tough. So your feet get very tough, and you just kind of get desensitized to the rocks and the pressure. You just get used to it, and your foot kind of just automatically adapts to that feeling. But at the same time, in Brazil, I almost didn't finish because of a rock. I was going downhill and just landed wrong at 40 or 50 miles, and that was a huge issue for the rest of the race. So
I had, well, first of all, I am in total awe of you. I go out and run 3 miles a day, and I think, wow, this is really great. I ran 3 miles today.
It's good no matter what.
Anyway, so I'm really interested in just kind of generalities about how you figure out what to eat and when to eat. And then I see these pictures of you in these huts, or the people in that movie, and it looked like they get there and there's just a big pile of junk food on the table. So how do you know what to eat? And then also just in big generalities, how much do you run a week, or how do you train in terms?
Yeah, so for the food, I've become a lot less picky. I used to be a lot pickier when I started, and like you're just not really sure what works, and it takes years sometimes to figure out what's the best food for you. Something that someone else might use, I might hate, or something that I like, some other person doesn't like at all. So it's just kind of a testing thing where you figure out what works. Just pretty much anything that doesn't sit in your stomach for a long time. That's kind of the number one rule. So very like low fiber things that are high in sugar, high in calories, high in fat. So I went from eating a ton of goo and like stuff very high in fructose or sugar to pretty much anything. So I was eating like sandwiches and burritos and things that would be like more fulfilling, because once you kind of get used to that 40 hours or 50 hours of just eating all that, sugar, you just get the worst stomach ache ever. And so it's become much easier for me to eat general foods instead of just eating like specialized racing stuff, like running food. So yeah, anything really. Fruit, burritos, anything that you can think of, Coke, all that stuff. And then what was the second question?
Training.
Oh yeah, just
how far do you run every day?
it depends. I mean, anywhere from, I run a lot less than a lot of people that are more competitive, and some people run 80 to 100 miles a week that do races like this, and I don't come close to that. I usually, at the most, will run probably 60 to 75 miles at the peak of my training. So that'll be about 75 miles in a week with like 2 25 or 30 milers back to back. So I do the like back-to-back days. So I'll run 30 miles on Saturday and 30 miles on Sunday or something like that. And that'll be kind of like the peak of my training. And that, to a lot of people, is not that much. Like my volume of training is a lot less than people that do the same runs that I do. I just personally, the time, and obviously I'm not fast, so it takes a long time for me to run 30 miles. So I can't just be doing that all the time. So anywhere from 30 to 75 miles. So.
Good luck and have fun.
Thank you.
I wondered, like in the Rim Trail, the Tahoe Trail, how long did it take you to recover?
I think it took about a month before I tried to run, like go on a normal run. Each time I progressed through the runs from like 50 miles to 100 milers and beyond that, your recovery time almost decreases, just because you should be in better shape at each point. Like that, every race I was training for, I was in better shape than the race before. So I would say I wouldn't run for about a month, but a few days you can't walk very much at all. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be on the couch for at least like 24 to 48 hours without doing anything. And then eventually when you get up and try to bend over to like wash yourself in the shower, you realize you can't do anything, because it's like you have to like sit in a bathtub. So, but yeah, it's probably about a month or so.
So you mentioned after a certain distance, the challenges are more mental than physical.
Definitely.
So other than the hallucinations, how do you deal with some of the mental challenges? Like, how do you keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I was asked this question a few days ago, and it's kind of a hard thing to answer, because at the time you're just dealing with it because it's reality and you're not planning for it, you're not expecting it, you just know it's going to come sometime, and sometimes it comes really slowly and other times it comes out of nowhere. So experience is a huge part. I mean, each race makes you that much more mentally prepared and strong for what's going to happen at the next one. But I guess I just kind of focus on what I need to do and just focus on what I'm doing and moving and staying in motion, because a lot of times when you're hallucinating and you're not really cognizant of where you are, you tend to slow down to the point where you're barely moving. And so especially at night when you're in the dark with the headlamp, you feel like you're moving a lot faster than you really are. So if you're moving, let's say like 15 or 20 miles, 20-minute mile, which would be like walking, it feels like you're going pretty quick. So it's important to just kind of focus on moving, understand that you're hallucinating, and understand that it's okay, and you're going to continue doing that, especially it's usually at night. You're not usually hallucinating a ton during the day. So it's just a process, I guess, and just something that I just deal with and just kind of accept it. And luckily I've had people with me, so I haven't had to like rely on my navigational skills or like figure out if I get to a point in the trail that I have to figure out where I'm going. I just follow them. So you can kind of turn your brain off. So I guess I focus on like nothing. I unfocus. I kind of just clear my mind and try to just continue moving, because that's really all you can do. It's not something you have to like think about or like analyze, because your mind is too caught up with what it's doing. So you can't really understand what is going on anyway. But if that's as best as I can answer it, I guess.
I'm curious about two things. One is shoes, because I'm a physical therapist in sports medicine. We have the belief that you're running on pavement or gravel or something, you need a different kind of shoe than if you're running on dirt and sand. And you're running on all of the above up there. So do you keep changing shoes, or you don't believe any of that, or what?
No, I mean, to this point, I've pretty much only been on trail. The coastal run, I was on more road than I had wanted to be, but it luckily wasn't an issue for my feet. But yes, I definitely would not be able to do what I do in those shoes on pavement if I was on road only. So the dirt, the grass, the trail surface definitely is a big factor in that. But just also the conditioning of your feet. I mean, it's taken, years for my feet to get where they're at now. And like a few years ago, they definitely were not even close to where they're at now. So it's just, I guess, a slow process and slow conditioning to strengthen your feet and the tendons and your ankles and everything in that area. And then just luckily I've been fortunate enough not to have any injuries, and your running form changes also. So that's a big thing for me, is wearing shoes. I have different form than I do wearing those Vibrams.
So you have like 2 different pairs of shoes, or 6 different?
Yeah, I've got two. Yeah. So up to this point, I've just gotten 2 actual pairs of shoes that aren't Vibrams. So that's what I plan on using.
Thanks. This is amazing. Can you talk about your strategy for this upcoming race? Do you see yourself kind of running it the way that we were seeing it in the movie there, or you said you keep moving all the time? Is that your strategy? And how can you possibly do that at night on some of the stuff we just saw?
Yeah, at night it's definitely going to be a different ball game, because you're by yourself and you got to obviously be aware of what's around you. And if you're on a sheer cliff, which there are many in that race. So yeah, I don't really have a strategy in a sense other than just going out slow. That's always one thing that you should just always do, because it's a long race. So everybody's excited and everybody's packed together. There's 550 people in a small area in the beginning, and I kind of want to get out of the way of everybody. So I want to try to go faster in the beginning just to kind of separate myself. So there'll be a group of competitive runners that'll go out real fast and be way ahead of everybody on purpose, so they don't have to deal with all the crowds. But I'll plan on just trying to get out as fast as I can to just get away from everybody, and then 3-4 hours into it, you're pretty much separated and you're very far away from other people. So like I said, my goal is to finish, and other than that, I want to see if I can go 80 hours without sleeping. If that doesn't happen, that's fine. Obviously, safety is an issue with this one, so I have to keep that as my number one priority. So, thank you. No, definitely not. Now, sleep deprivation training, not something I've tried, but not something I would try either. It's not the healthiest thing for you, and something that I do just because I have to, and it's 2 or 3 days out of a year. So, doing it on a regular basis, I don't think would be a healthy option or a healthy choice.
Do you feel as though the training you get in the headlands and on Mount Tam is sufficient enough for the Alps?
I hope so. It's been sufficient enough for everything up to this point. This will be 3 times steeper, or 3 times more elevation gain than Tahoe Rim Trail was. So it's going to be insanely hard, and I'm aware of that. But it's more like, I guess, the hiking orientation or the oriented training will be the difference in this one. I'll do more hiking as opposed to just running. I'll do extremely steep courses knowing that I'm not going to be running the entire time. If you saw a lot of those guys had poles, I'll have poles because you have to have them. It's a requirement. And I've never run with poles before. So it's going to be something that I have to get used to, which so far I've actually liked them. So I'll do a lot less I'll do running, but I won't do as much running as I will steep hiking, because a lot of it will be that. I'll go to Tahoe a few times in the summer when the snow melts just to get some altitude training in. And that's another thing. I've just been fortunate up to this point of not having like huge effects from altitude. And this is very similar in altitude to Tahoe Rim Trail. So hopefully that'll continue and I won't have any issues with like headaches or heart issues or anything like that. But yeah, we were very lucky to have this backyard next to us for 50 miles of endless trails. So.
I noticed it seems that it's mostly men participating. Is that true? And why do you think that is? Actually, in this race, it's funny because my girlfriend said that a few days ago, and she said the exact same thing. And I was wondering if that was just this race or if that was all in Europe. I'm not sure what the male to female ratio is in Europe in European races. But here, there actually is a lot of women participating in ultra running or ultra races because it's kind of exploded in popularity in the last few years. And men, women, people my age, like 25, 23 used to be like unheard of for ultra runners. And now some of the best ultra runners in the world are in their 20s. And so it's kind of changed over the last few years. So in this race, because I think the length of it, the pace of it, the difficulty of it, just for whatever reason, there's not a lot of women. But there are still a fair amount. I'm not sure why they don't get drawn to this one, I guess. I'm not sure if they have a requirement of how many men and how many women they have to have. So, but there are a lot of women in ultra running in general. Yeah. I don't. I do core exercises with a kettlebell, and that's pretty much my only other form of strengthening because your core and your back and your neck are actually like the two things that go out first when you're doing these things. Your low back and your neck get extremely tired from keeping your head up and just from being upright. So I do a lot of that when I start training, but no gym stuff, no heavy lifting or anything like that. So I can't swim either, so well, at least.
Why don't we'll just take one more question, and then I'm sure David would be willing to stay up front and and talk to folks.
How did you qualify for that race, being that there's only 500 plus people? What did you have to do to?
Yeah, great question. I was, again, very, very fortunate. I had to fill out an application and just include everything that I've done up to this point. It's actually one of the few races that doesn't have like a list of requirements that you had to have met to apply. So I wasn't sure if it was due to my qualifications or due to the fact that I was from the U.S. or why they chose me. It was more of a lottery-based system this year where they had so many applicants that they had to choose by a lottery. So it might have been just pure luck. I don't know. So in this race, you don't necessarily have to have run X amount of hundreds or X amount of 135s, but most races are like that. I think this race is just so difficult and long that they kind of expect the people that sign up for it to know what they're signing up for or to know what they're applying to, because a lot of people that do 135 milers here and other stuff like that aren't trying to do this. So it's just a totally different race for a lot of people. It's a much slower paced race, which is perfect for my style because I'm slow. So, yeah.
Well, David, thank you very much. We all wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for coming.